Hello, my name is Donald Kramer, and I am the statistician for the Wisconsin Annual Conference. I am a lay member of the Milwaukee Central United Methodist Church. I have been volunteering as the conference statistician for about 10 years now. Before we start looking at the data, I want to talk a little bit about the statistics process. Each year, every church across the denomination, they submit their data to a central database called Ezra. Every church is required by discipline to do that by January 31st. The past 2 years, we've been extending that deadline to February 28th, just because everyone sort of seems to need a little bit extra time during this pandemic. Then what happens is I look over the data, our administrators, we look through some errors, we follow up on questions, and then eventually we submit our data to the general conference by April 30th. Then that data is used to look at trends, to calculate apportionments, to think about how resources are allocated. The data gets used throughout the conference and the whole general conference. I pulled this data from UMC data just to show the North Central jurisdiction. All of the numbers on this screen came from local churches submitting their data, which then got pushed upward to the general conference level. These are the 10 conferences within the North Central jurisdiction. If you look towards the bottom of the page, you can see Wisconsin down there. It's one of the smaller conferences in our jurisdiction with only 456 churches and 52,000 members. That's as of 2020. The jurisdiction hasn't put together their data from all of the conferences yet from 2021. This is especially important also as we're thinking about how the denomination is restructuring, how it's thinking about leadership, how it's thinking about its direction in these next couple of years to really see our place and how we fit in with other conferences and other jurisdictions. In 2021, I want to talk about specifically how that data looks, how it came in. This year we had about 446 local churches. I'm saying it's about there because with new church starts and with churches closing throughout the year, 446 isn't exactly always the correct number throughout the entire year, but we're going to use that when we talk about our data in this presentation. More than 80% of the local churches submitted their data prior to the deadline, which is a huge help. It's a lot less follow-up that I have to go through and saves me for other work. Eventually, only 18 churches were missing some of their data. So to have 96% participation was really great for this year's data submission. In total, we had about 14,000 warnings. A warning is generated every time a church changes its data significantly from the previous year. Usually it all makes sense and the churches submit an explanation for that warning, but there are a lot of warnings to go through, and that's part of the process to clean the data before we submit it to general conference. Looking at our data, the first number most people want to see is membership, and you can see our trends throughout the years are decreasing. And this is 2021 is no difference. I think we're all experiencing that at the local church level. 2021 was the year that we dropped below 50,000. This next slide talks about weekly worship participation. The first line, average weekly worship. I think with the drop in 2020, I think I expected some bounce back to pre-pandemic levels. I was surprised to see that there was the decrease in worship numbers. Online worship, we expected it to go down as people started meeting in person again. Sunday school numbers didn't seem to bounce back. They just continued to decline in 2021. Vacation Bible School participants, that increased, but I don't know if that's necessarily program by program or just many programs didn't meet in 2020 and then returned in 2021, which made the numbers increase from 2020 to 2021. This next slide, this one is the one that concerns me the most. Christian formation group participants, each age group had declined. If we are worried about membership going down, definitely if Christian formation groups are declining, then I think that's, we're going to expect to see membership following these trends also. Some other participation values, United Methodist Men and United Women in Faith both report their activity based on projects and the expenses of those projects. That's the first two lines, calculated in thousands of dollars. The next two lines are small groups, ongoing groups, and short-term groups that meet. Both had declining values in 2021. And finally, the last two, measuring United Methodist volunteers and mission, both saw increases after the decline during the 2020 pandemic shutdowns. Our next slide is church assets. These are assets held by the local churches. This does not include anything held by the conference, such as camps or individual churches that the conference owns. You can see the values of the property keeps increasing. We don't really see a decrease in properties that matches the decrease in the number of members that are taking care of those properties. That last line is other debt, and that's included really because these last 2 years with PPP loans, that other debt, a big decrease in that is in 2020, the PPP loans were issued, and then in 2021, they were forgiven. So that's what that big decrease between those 2 years are on that line. This next slide talks about personnel at the local church level and what churches are reporting that they're paying them. Any changes on this slide, I'm not necessarily attributing that to any decrease. I'm not really attributing that to individuals actually getting paid less, but there being fewer employees at the local church level, which is how I'm attributing these decreases. I also want to remind you, these are the total expenses from the church's point of view. It includes salary plus housing added together. And then looking at income and how income has changed between 2020 and 21. If you look, the second to bottom line, the actual totals in millions of dollars hasn't changed by much. But what seems to have happened is some of the categories have switched values. And it looks like pledges went down, but non-pledged giving went up. So I wonder if that's just attributed to fewer pledge drives happening for 2021. Finally, that last line, non-UMC grants, I included that because that's sort of the flip side of the PPP loans, right? When the PPP loan was forgiven, churches entered that as a grant that was given to them. And you can see we had quite some large PPP grants given in 2020 and 2021, right? So these past few slides have really been comparing 2020 to 2021. These next few slides, I'm trying to capture some of the characteristics of our conference. The first one here I want to talk about is distribution based on district. That pie chart on the left shows the number of churches, the 446 churches, how they're distributed amongst the 5 districts. You can see they're pretty close to 20% of our churches are in each district. And then the pie chart on the right is the distribution of our membership, the 49,800 members, how they're distributed amongst our 5 districts. I don't think it's very surprising to see that more than half of our members are in the 2 southern districts where population in the state is more concentrated. This next slide, what I did is I took the compensation paid by the local churches and I broke it up. I tried to think of it from the point of view of our minimum elder and full salaries. That's somewhere in the lower 40, somewhere around $43,000. And so I broke it up saying, okay, if 43,500 is about the minimum, this was a good cut point in our data. So that was about a good minimum for a full-time elder. Cut that in half, 21,750. would be about the cut point for a half-time pastor, and then 10,800 for a quarter-time pastor. And so what happens is, if you look at that pie chart on the left, that's again the number of churches. It looks like 31.9% of our churches are paying enough money to cover the minimum of elder in full. Okay. And then on the right, that's membership again. Looking at that, how we'd interpret that is we'd say 66.4% of our membership are attending churches that can that pay the pastor's salary enough for a full-time pastor. So really, when I look at these two graphs together, in my mind, it looks like a third of our churches can pay for a full-time pastor, and 2/3 of our members are attending those same churches. And then my final slide, really I just wanted to capture some interesting values from this year. Of the 446 churches in our conference, 50% receive rent as part of their income. And you can sort of think of that in two different ways. The cynic might say, 50% of our churches need rent to make their to make ends meet. But the more optimist might say, 50% of our churches already are ingrained in their communities that other groups feel comfortable using our church buildings. Already we're building relationships with our neighbors. So you can sort of think of it that way. 65% of our churches reported some sort of community outreach ministry. I really would have expected that to be closer to 100%. And I'm hoping that's just being underreported, and that next year we'll see more attention to that and be able to report a higher number amongst our churches. 66% report some sort of small group. And again, if we're concerned about declining membership, a good way to build community, to invite people to our churches are with small groups. And I would hope that this number would increase next year also to beyond just 2/3 of our churches. And then finally, 74% of our churches are reporting Christian formation groups, and that includes Sunday schools. So the other 26% are reporting that they have no Christian formation happening at their church. And definitely that's something that I'm hoping will change in the upcoming years. All right. So finally, this is my email address at the bottom of the page. If you have any questions, or if you have want to know anything else about statistics or the Wisconsin Annual Conference, I love talking about both. I'm sorry I couldn't be there this year, and I hope to return next year in person. And thank you very much for your attention today. I'm hoping that you have a blessed and productive annual conference. Have a good day.